you're only as good as your last failure. Because as soon as you fail once, they're just like, see, I told you they can't do it. Regardless, if you've done it 9 times in a row successfully, you fail once. If you haven't established that credibility yet, you're not going to be good enough. There's so much to AI that's overwhelming. 15 minutes a day on these 48 tools are going to help you get better. It's like, oh my God, that's like, I don't even know where to start.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to Proc-N-Roll, your guide to practical procurement, where we make procurement rock and roll. I'm Zach, your expert on all things procurement. With me today is Natasha, the founder and CEO of Candor Procurement, enabling transformation results for some of the world's top procurement teams. And today, ladies and gentlemen, we have a very special guest, Ted Baumuller, formerly the global leader of Source to Pay at Meta, but with prior leadership roles at Cisco and other organizations across supply chain, IT, and procurement. Ted, it's so great to have you with us and you know, for you to share some of your experience with us. So welcome.
Thanks, Zach. It's great to be here. I appreciate it.
Well, let me just squeeze in here is that, Zach, I have to say that it's a very big misfortune for Conrad. Every time we have the most interesting guest, he has to miss. Ted, I am very, very grateful that I did not have to twist your arms to come to the podcast. But you and I have been old colleagues and we've seen each other through World 50. We got consult from each other. I remember when I was at Nike and we were designing up our scenarios and the model for our P2P solution. You were very instrumental in helping us to shape up our thinking, what the great P2P and source to pay looks like. But I know that you haven't always been a procurement guy and you made some pretty significant impact on supply chain before you joined procurement. Can you give our viewers and listeners a little bit more about your professional experience?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'll try to keep this short. And talking about my career, it's kind of been this interesting thing that's just kind of evolved. I got a degree in supply chain from Michigan State, which is still one of the top 2 or 3 supply chain programs in the country, and got a job right out of college working at Abbott Laboratories. But I was there for a year and a half because it was just kind of a little antiquated in terms of the role that I was in, and I joined Cisco, and I had a 23-year career at Cisco, which was absolutely fantastic. My first 9 years were in supply chain. I had 7 different jobs within supply chain because the company was growing so fast. So I got to see all elements of supply chain, whether it was, a buyer, a master scheduler, a production manager, a new product program manager, and I ran kind of operations. I worked in logistics, and it was kind of interesting. So after like 9 years, I realized that on the direct side of procurement or the supply chain side, it's much more engineering focused, and it was all about parts. And I realized no matter what job I had, I either had too many parts or not enough parts. And I spent all my time getting rid of the parts that I didn't want and paying too much money for the parts that I didn't have. Now, I have a lot of friends that are in that organization, in that function, and that is what they thrive on. I hated it. I was miserable. I didn't like it. So I moved into IT, which was kind of this weird transformational role where we were upgrading our order management portion of our ERP to Oracle 11i at the time. This was a long time ago. And it was kind of this interesting transformation where the business didn't really know much about IT, and IT really didn't know much about the business. So I was hired as this business readiness manager to get the business ready for this massive transformation. And I absolutely fell in love with IT, and I loved the organization. And over 11 years, I spent time working with customer service and product sales and service sales and marketing and finance and engineering. And I ran Cisco.com for a period of time. It's like you've got a non-technical guy that doesn't know anything about architecture leading the company's main website, which was interesting. My boss at the time said, "Hey, Ted, you need to go into infrastructure if you want to be a CIO." I was like, "I don't want to be a CIO." He's like, "Why have you spent 11 years in IT if you don't want to be a CIO? What are you doing?" And that's kind of when, I raised my hand for something new, and the head of procurement at Cisco asked me to kind of come take the job. And what was interesting is I moved into this kind of category and supplier manager role she said, why is the IT guy right for this? And I said, because I know everybody within the company, because I've been there for so long, and I knew all the leadership team, and I knew why marketing did this. I knew why engineering did this. I knew why finance did this, and I knew how they did it. And I knew all, and I had built those relationships. Procurement was kind of in this interesting transformation where they were starting to become more relevant, or trying to become more relevant and becoming more mature. And the business didn't know how to work with procurement. And procurement didn't know how to work with the business. You've got all these procurement people that are leading with cost savings and leading with procurement speak. And the business is like, can't you just give me a purchase order? I just want to buy something. So kind of at that time, driving that transformation was incredible. And I was in that role for 3 years, and this opportunity at Facebook at the time came up to come be their head of global source to pay. And I told my boss at the time, Alex Lopez, who I still think is one of the best leaders that I've ever worked for. She said, you're ready for that next job, but that next job is my job and I'm not going anywhere. So if I can help get you a job somewhere else, I'll do that. And she was instrumental in kind of helping me land that role at Facebook, which transitioned into Meta over a period of time. And I was there for 5 years, where we scaled the organization significantly, and then went through a pretty significant transformation, reducing that organization. And I loved every minute of it. It was just a great experience for me. And I've been kind of semi-retired and doing a little advising for a couple small startups from a procurement standpoint for the last year. So that's me.
That's amazing. That, like, I think in your introduction, you summarized our previous 5 episodes. Okay. Say again this part about the parts, because I don't think I will ever get tired to hear it.
Yeah. So, I mean, we either had too many parts or not enough parts. And I spent more time trying to get rid of the parts that I didn't need, and more money trying to buy the parts that I didn't have. And I was like, I don't want to do that anymore.
It's kind of like anyone who spends a lot of money on getting 4-year degree in supply chain, they basically get the entire gist of 4 years in that one phrase. Thank you for expressing it so succinctly and so wisely. You touched on a very important point, Ted, that procurement kept talking savings to IT or marketing or any other part of organization. And the stakeholders just needed to get the PO because they wanted to get their stuff done. Do you think that underlines the main disconnect, that why frequently procurement is having difficulties to be accepted or be welcomed as thought partners, but by their business partners, by the key stakeholders? Can we double click on that?
Yeah, I think that's part of it. I also I was so fortunate to work in different functions, and with different functions within that function. Like, I never would have had exposure to the different business functions had I not been on IT. You can't go from engineering into marketing into sales. Like some unicorns can, some of those ridiculously smart people that can make that transition. I wasn't really there, but it was interesting for me. And what I found was, if you haven't worked in another function, you don't really understand that function. You think you do. And what I loved about my time at Cisco, and I saw this at Meta as well, everybody thinks their job is the most difficult and the most important. And I think that's fantastic. But until you do somebody else's job, you have no clue what they do. So you think you know what procurement does, but you have no clue of what the end-to-end procurement lifecycle is. It's just about find me a supplier, get me a purchase order, and get it here tomorrow. Like, what's the lead time? Yesterday. How fast do you want it? And if procurement comes in leading with savings, the business is going to say, you know what, you're talking about, you're just a back office cost center function. You're not adding value if you're just talking about savings. So leading with this opportunity, whether you're looking at marketing and, generating more leads or driving acquisition of higher leads and generating that into revenue. If you lead with that and you speak the language, all of a sudden you get in the door. And everybody talks about getting a seat at the table. In some functions, you're not even in the door yet, let alone at the table. And that evolution of getting that seat at the table to evolving to a voice at the table where you're actually impacting their decisions because they're listening to you. You're not just kind of sitting there. So I think sometimes when procurement comes in and leads with savings, they're doing themselves a disservice, because while probably important, and that's what they're maybe being goaled on by, the finance executives at the company, if you lead with that with a function, they're just going to be like, you are transactional, you're adding no value. Just get it faster.
So what should organizations lead with? Procurement organizations then lead with, Ted. What's been most successful from your experience? How do you get the business functions to actually treat you like a serious value adding partner?
Yeah, I mean, it's being able to translate your message into their language or something that resonates with them. So, if you go to IT and you talk about, the total cost, not just the price. Like I always used to use licensing costs, like licensing with Salesforce or Microsoft, and how many do you need, and how many do you want, and how many are you using, and are there true ups? If you go in having a conversation with something that resonates with them, and Natasha and I were talking about this the other night. Different functions have different kind of buzzwords that resonate. And if you talk about, with marketing, you go in and you talk about, lead generation or demand generation or ROI per marketing spend. They're like, oh my God, you get me. Like, you understand it. Now, you got to be very careful, because I've got myself into a lot of trouble before pretending I know what they're talking about. And all of a sudden they go deeper and it's just like, oh God, I don't know what you're talking about. Let me bring in the expert. But that's where you don't have to be the expert. I remember when I was at Cisco, we made this run, this field trip to an Accenture facility that had just acquired this procurement service function. It was fascinating. We did this floor walk, and I met with the woman who ran the marketing category for spend optimization. And she was a former CMO at a marketing agency. And I thought, oh my God, I've hired nothing but procurement people. I'm not going to get in the door with marketing people, because that person speaks the language. So it's having the ability to translate and speak the language of the function. And every function is going to be a little bit different. Natasha, you had some great specific examples about the different functions and kind of the buzzwords that you used.
Yes, indeed. Yeah, I started thinking you're giving away my top secrets. But yes, so with marketing is brand integrity, right? Because if I come to marketing people and tell them that, hey, you have 180 providers of tchotchkes, and we can actually consolidate all in one. And they would say, why? And I would say, well, because it will make shipment more effective, and because it will reduce the cost, and because it will be easier for you to manage one supplier. They're like, we don't care. We don't manage this 180 suppliers, but it's convenient for us because they're all in different parts of the world, and we can have stuff to be sent instantly. But if you lead that conversation with integrity of the logo, or integrity of the brand. If you have 180 logos flying around in different places and different fonts and different color and different font size, then you do get marketing attention. Marketing is responsible for the revenue. So for them, anything that leads to revenue generation is important. It's for supply chain, it's capacity. Right? You lead with the cost savings, and they would say, well, if we're going to save, I don't know, 200% per trailer, but the goods are not in our stores, then we don't have a company. We don't generate any revenue. So, and we spoke about it before, how important it is to really speak the language that organizations are driven by, because every business unit have their own responsibilities, and you either helping them to achieve their goal or you hinder it. And while you may be achieving someone else's goal on their turf, so like you may help finance to achieve savings goals while working with legal, but if legal does not have the right legal representation by a third-party law firm somewhere in intellectual property defending rights somewhere in Louisville, then all your strategy goes out of the window.
Yeah, one of the interesting use cases I just kind of thought of about that was on the engineering side. Engineering always thinks anything operational is easy and it just should flow and it should be simple. My son is just graduated from school and has an entry-level job as a mechanical engineer at Cisco. And he's like, Dad, why is it so hard to buy things at Cisco? And I was like, son, I implemented that platform. Like, I was involved. Now it is transitioned and evolved into a much better program than it is now. But he's like, this is so hard. And that's where, I think regardless of the technology that you have, it's always going to be perceived as something a little bit more different. Anybody who has ever bought something on Amazon thinks that buying something at an enterprise level should be that simple. And it's not going to be for a reason, but you can continue to evolve to make that easier. If you talk to engineering about how you're going to set up capabilities to have, resources at the ready. So they call you at, 6:00 on a Friday afternoon saying, I need 30 resources in Bangalore on Monday. If you built those agreements with them, if you lead with, I'm going to have capacity ready for you, for your development team to scale. That's when they start to say, oh, it's not just about the cost. It's not just about, it's, 30-day onboarding and we need to do these background checks. There's so much work that procurement does to protect the company that functions just don't understand. And that's just because they've never done it before. So, and to be honest, a lot of them don't even care. So don't lead with that. Do that in the background, but lead with that conversation where it's going to resonate with them. And then you're going to get that foot in the door and maybe a seat at the table.
And what if the resistance persists? How do you see the role separation between, let's say, CPO, the head of procurement, and then, let's say, senior director, manager, right? Because the person on the front line is usually the person the lowest in supply chain, right? And what does it mean to you to open the doors or make your team successful and help procurement team establish relationships with stakeholders? Because I also see the difference between opening the door, which is certainly the function of the leadership, but also keeping the door open, which means not just make an introduction, work with this, or like I met with CMO, he said, yes, now you go ahead and work with every level within the organization that may not necessarily receive the memo from the CMO partner with his procurement people. So I think the role of the responsibility of the leadership is not just to open the door, but keep it open. So continue helping the team to go through. But sometimes resistance persists. How do you see the roles different within procurement organization?
At the end of the day, you've got to deliver on what you promised you're going to deliver on. If you say you're going to do something, then do it. If you're going to say you're going to get onboarding down to 20 days or 15 days or 10 days, you're only as good as your last failure. Because as soon as you fail once, they're just like, see, I told you they can't do it. Regardless, if you've done it 9 times in a row successfully, you fail once. If you haven't established that credibility yet, you're not going to be good enough. So I think the important part is to know, like, truly understand what are the pain points, not just this is broken or that's too slow. And we had this real healthy conversation with the R&D, like the main Meta Labs or the AI lab team, or I can't remember what they were called at the time, but we had a serious problem because they wanted to onboard so many new suppliers so fast, and it took us forever to do that. And we had weekly meetings with the head that reported directly into Mark Zuckerberg, weekly meetings with him to talk about the value that we were delivering, when we were going to get there, how fast it was going to happen, and how much value it was going to deliver. And we hit it week after week after week. We said, in the next 4 weeks, we're going to deliver these things. And if 4 weeks later, we delivered it. And that's when we finally got that credibility. Now, we were still too slow, but we got more credibility. We're like, okay, these guys know what they're doing. Let them do that. And we actually got the top down to kind of push back and say, hey, give them a chance. Because, in some organizations, they can be very hierarchical. You can start at the top and think you can force that down. Meta wasn't like that at all. And, there's most functions are going to be like, yeah, I know he said that, but I don't care. I'm going to try to do it faster. I'm going to try to do it better. So at different levels, you're going to have different expectations. But as long as you do what you say you're going to do, You have to deliver. If you can't, say you can't and say why. Look, this isn't going to get any better for the next 2 months because I've got to do this, and this over the next 6 weeks. You set those expectations and hope to God that they believe you, but do not miss that deliverable or your credibility is just going to get shot.
Well, that's super wise, Ted. But I mean, you have to deliver, but I see a lot of organizations, they're not even communicating what it is that they're going to deliver to begin with, right? I mean, did you have to set those targets and KPIs, and do you have to communicate those? And how did you do that? How did you go about, actually getting them to start measuring you, by your own yardstick? Let's put it that way.
We failed a lot. Now, I don't know that my team will agree with me that I failed, but I tried to set expectations. I think being humble and being realistic is going to get you farther than being confident and missing deliverables. Because if you say you're going to do something and you don't do it, I admitted, look, we blew it. This was wrong. We're going to do this, but here's how we're going to do that. And you got to the point where it's like, okay, do we really need to meet every week on this? Because you've done it. And that's where you can't until you make it happen, until you get that credibility, you've got to over communicate. And to the point where they're like, okay, stop. I don't want to hear it anymore. Then I feel like you've won because they don't need, or you've lost completely and you've got to start all over.
I want to go back to a couple of things and I want to help it to marry to me and to our listeners and viewers. So on one hand, by the virtue of your own story, supply chain, tech, procurement, you are a proponent of cross-functional training, right? At the same time, when the conversation would go deep with your stakeholders, and you're like, wow, you are out of the territory when you're knowledgeable enough to be dangerous and you need to bring your subject matter experts. So break it down to me, like wear two hats, please. One hat is that you're the head of procurement. So who do you hire? Do you hire people who have broad enterprise experience, or do you hire SMEs, or both? And if you are a young procurement professional, how do you recommend they build career in this field? By zigzagging through organization and different functions, or building specific subject matter expertise in one area?
Yeah, that's a huge opportunity as you start to think about who your procurement organization can become. I do think you need to hire a little bit of both. You need to have people who understand procurement, but you also need to have people who understand the business. So do you hire somebody from the business and teach them procurement? Or do you hire somebody with procurement background and teach them business? And I think you can do both. And I think it depends on kind of what the need is, and what the problem is. If you're trying to optimize your platform to be much more efficient in how you run the function of procurement, you need procurement experts. But if you need to try to understand your sourcing category, your category strategy, your sourcing strategy, your relationship with the business, you can teach that business person procurement. So I think you've got to have that mixture of both. Natasha, we talked about this a little bit last week when we were looking at people moving into different categories. And as a sourcing manager, like, do you start in, like, how long do you spend in marketing? How long do you spend in IT or technology? How long do you spend in, at Meta, we had, FCS or facilities, culinary and security. They were one function. I think as a early in career person, get as much experience as you can with different categories. And you're not going to be kind of that category manager. You're going to be, a strategic sourcing associate or a strategic sourcing manager. And that's where you learn a little bit about the function. But I would highly encourage you. I had no idea how my career was evolving when I was in IT. I just loved the function. And I loved that our CIO at the time, every year would restructure the organization. Every 2 years, she would restructure the organization. So organizations kind of can be centralized and decentralized and centralized. So I had that opportunity to see different business functions and to learn that within IT. I think procurement is an incredible function to start, or supply chain. I'm actually mentoring 3 Michigan State students right now, which is actually kind of exciting because you're just getting started in the supply chain program, and they're like, "What can I do?" I'm like, "Oh my God, you're sitting on a gold mine and you have no idea," because that's where I think procurement specifically, maybe not so much on the direct side, procurement is more business focused, and you have the opportunity to learn different business functions. And as a procurement person who's trying to establish credibility, I had multiple people when I was at Meta move into, like, from procurement, move into legal, from procurement, move into marketing, from procurement, move into IT. Guess what? Now you have 3 people that are procurement advocates in the business that are driving the value of procurement from inside their company. You don't even, or from inside their function. You don't need the procurement people to help them understand why procurement is important. They're your advocate. And that's where, I think, procurement is an opportunity to drive, like, career growth for people, because you can go into so many different functions from starting within that function, or you can build a career in procurement, which I think is pretty exciting too.
Ted, how much time do you have to spend to really become that category expert? How much time do you have to spend with the business, right? I mean, if you had to guess, because like you said, you got to build that deep business knowledge, that functional knowledge. You got to use the lingo. You got to know the market, etc. So should you be sitting in procurement, or should you be spending more of your time, in near the desks where the actual business function you're serving are?
I was a huge fan of co-locating. While I wanted my team to be together, if marketing wanted 3 of my sourcing managers or my category manager to sit with them, I was all over it. 1, because I needed the space at the time, but 2, because of the relationships that it would build. It's that out of sight, out of mind is real. I realized that since I've left Meta, it's like, where are all the friends that were told me that they were going to call me? I still keep in touch with a couple of them, but if you can be physically located with that business function, I think it's a massive opportunity. In terms of how long you stay there or how long you need to be there, I think it depends on what you want to be. If you want to be a procurement career, have procurement, be a procurement expert forever. You can move into a couple different functions. But if you want to, like, eventually you get to that point where it's like, God, I really like marketing. I don't like sourcing for marketing. I want to go into marketing. If they hire you into it, that is a victory, because it proves that you have not only learned their function, you've become value adding to that function, and they see you as potentially an expert in marketing. That's like, I think that's kind of the holy grail of career development.
That's awesome. Ted, we recorded a lot of episodes this year, peeling the layers on technology and AI aspects that will impact procurement, that already impacting procurement and will continue to change the way we approached in the past. Even though you're currently not on active duties, but I know that you keep your hand on the pulse of how procurement is evolving very tightly. Where do you see this? And my question may be vague, but I want you to, but it's on purpose because don't want you to feel restricted with your answer. Like, if you're stepping into the next CPO role tomorrow, how do you see this interconnection, and where would you stitch human relationships? Where would you stitch technology? Like, how would you weave this overall picture of new vision of procurement organization? Where's the emphasis on human connection? Where is the emphasis on technology utilization?
Yeah, I think it's always an interesting one. Having the IT background that I was so fortunate to have, it was interesting working with different functions. And I remember I was supporting marketing for a certain period of time where MarTech became a thing, and all of a sudden this roadmap of the different technologies that were available for the different pieces within marketing. And they're like, okay, when am I going to get that, Ted? And I'm like, in 2 years, I can get you that, but that's going to evolve and you're going to be behind. So we're going to transform the function from a technology standpoint. And in 2 years, this is our roadmap. First of all, it's like 2 years. It's going to take you 2 years to get that. Like, how can I do it faster? And it's just, is it one big platform that's, like the and I won't name names because I've used many of the different the different technologies on the procurement side. All of them are great. None of them are perfect. None of them are wonderful. I always used to joke about, the best one is the one that you don't have, because what you have, there's something wrong with it. And then someone else is going to solve the problem that's wrong with it, but there's going to be another problem. And I think technology is going to continue to evolve. So I don't think that you're ever going to have this, okay, when are we done with a transformation to the next technology? Never, because in 2 years, your expectations are going to be higher. What you've automated in the past is now going to transition to something that is going to be just done through things like AI, but you're always going to have resources. And I truly don't think that, I think AI can replace some jobs, but I think for the most part, somebody knows how to use AI is going to replace the job of somebody who doesn't know how to use AI. And I think, there's going to be this transformation of, eliminating roles that are repeatable and transactional. And I think that can happen. But that's where, that's what I always use. That's the crap work that nobody wants to do anyway. So if you can simplify and eliminate that work to focus on the real work, then in my opinion, that's the conversation, that building the relationships with the stakeholders. Technology is not going to improve a relationship. That is all human focused. And I think that, sometimes people just assume that we're going to throw some money at this, or we're going to build this platform and we're not going to need half of the procurement team. I think you can automate the back end transactional piece. Absolutely. But nobody wants to do that work. You've outsourced the majority of that anyway. If you can eliminate the cost of outsourcing it, then that's fantastic, and hire the people that are going to drive the relationship and drive that togetherness with the business function and the function of procurement.
If anything, I think procurement would be in a winning position if we would more often volunteer this and proactively approach the company with these opportunities to reduce the cost in this area, or eliminate the function, or retrain the people and move them onto different area. I want to ask you one more question, then I'll pass it on to Zach. From your experience, when you mentor the students, what skills do you suggest them to double click on and to build, right? So coding used to be like 5-10 years ago, code. It's no longer as relevant as it used to be. Like in my books for the last 26 years, I always said that I am just looking for problem solver and people who are intellectually curious. But if you also look at it from the professional skill set, like would you recommend people like try to get to internal audit and then go to procurement, or try to move to internal audit from procurement? Like your path is supply chain, IT, procurement. Where do you see also kind of like successful zigzags? Like what works well?
Yeah, I don't know that there's any one specific recipe that works well. I never thought that, when I started in supply chain, one, I never thought that I would lead Cisco.com. Two, I never thought that I would lead procurement at Meta. So I think it's just one of those things where you've got to follow the path of what you learn and what you enjoy. And learning, you spend 12 to 18 months learning something. It's just like, ooh, yeah, I learned I don't want to do that ever again. You've learned, but now you have somewhat of the language to be able to speak that. I think from a skill set standpoint, building personal relationships is the most important thing. If you want to go into a kind of a business function role, I also think, having like being an expert and understanding how to use data and transform, like, what am I looking at and what is the next best action that I can take versus I've analyzed all this data and here's your information. It's like, well, what do you want me to do with that? Like getting to that point, that problem solving point of really understanding what it is. So I think kind of data analytics, in my opinion, is something that everybody should focus on. And then figuring out this kind of massive world. They say AI, there's so much to AI that's overwhelming. spending, you see those little Instagram feeds and it's just like 15 minutes a day on these 48 tools are going to help you get better. It's like, oh my God, that's like, I don't even know where to start. But my kids are running circles around, my kids, it's like, they're 22 and 19. They're running circles around me with some of these things that they're looking at because it's just become natural to them. It's not like, something that I have to go learn from scratch. It's kind of what my son learned at Gonzaga in, studying mechanical engineering. There are things that they're teaching them now that I didn't have exposure to. So that technology evolution is going to change it used to be every 18 to 24 months. Now it's every, 4 to 6 months. The technology from an AI standpoint is evolving to a point where it's like, oh my God, how do I keep up with this?
I think, Ted, as a technologist, I really wanted to ask you these two questions. Hopefully Natasha doesn't shoot me because I'm bringing up AI again. But two things, your views on intake and orchestration, given that the tech market moves so quickly nowadays, is intake and orchestration another one of these quote unquote fads that's going to come and go, be replaced by something better? And is that something better agents? And my second question is, do you see a world where procurement is just fully automated and you've just got agents running the whole process? Do you see that happening in any other functions? I mean, what's your view on where AI can take us? So those are two questions.
Yeah, I think, look, any way you can use technology to simplify and automate anything, I think is value added. And I think that if you can simplify getting people what they need, I always used to say when I was at Cisco, anybody with $1 and an idea and a VP approval can buy whatever they want, whenever they want, from whoever they want. And when I moved to Meta, it was anybody with it because the spend thresholds and the dollars were so big at the time. Anybody with $1 an idea can buy whatever they want. They didn't even need a VP approval, but it took too long to do it because we hadn't built the capabilities to get them that. So I think anytime you can get people what they want faster in an efficient manner that is managed by cost, managed by risk, I think that's great. So if you can use technology to simplify that, I'm all for it. And I think that we should double down on that. But I don't think that it eliminates the need for the function. I really don't. I think that, this may be, my 54-year-old self saying that, where somebody who's, a lot smarter than me and is probably, 30, 35 years old that understands technology better than me. But I think that that relationships take time. And I think that is the important thing that people are going to lose sight on. I see it in, these recent, the new college grads that are coming in that aren't the best communicators. They haven't established relationships. I used to joke about, the scene where, here's how you used to know where your kids were, because there were 40 bikes on somebody's front lawn and because they were outside riding bikes. My son is, in his room playing video games with 14 different people and having a blast. He's building relationships, but are they truly connected relationships? And that's where I feel that face-to-face conversation, and Zoom is one thing, but personal interactions, you get so much value out of being in the same room with somebody. And I will take that to my grave, that I think that is the most important thing. And that is the relationship that I think that procurement can build with the different business functions.
Tell what I want to say, like if I can raise both arms in support of what you just said. And very often speaking with our former colleagues, I hear not necessarily maybe complaints, but certainly dissatisfaction with how the young generation comes across, right? And they often hear the adjectives entitled, uncommitted and uncollaborative, self-centered, and all of that. I think this is where we as leaders need to also bring compassion and remember that some of them graduated colleges from the time of COVID and were limited in having a benefit of personal interactions and building strong personal connections and frankly were forced in some pretty significant professionally forming years to interact via Zoom. And after that, the corporations did not speak in one voice in what is return to office approach is. Someone says, stay home, come back to the office 3 days, 4 days, 5 days, stay hybrid. Like, and it was very, very confusing, and people were changing jobs during this confusion. And so we haven't really, as leaders, I think we have to take it as our responsibility to help people bridge this gap, because for as long as corporations will spend money, and they always will, business spends money to make more money, procurement will exist. If procurement function will exist, then procurement organization will exist. And your point is very, very valid, that technology is technology. Relationships will not go anywhere.
Yeah. But I also think, I do think this new generation of college graduates, have had a very, very rough last 3 years, last 5 years. And how they build relationships is very, very different. And I remember my grandfather saying kids these days. And I remember my dad saying kids these days. And here I am as a dad saying kids these days. Everybody's going to say that. And how people evolve over time, is something that I think as leaders, we need to accept and realize that, just as you don't treat, you treat somebody the way they want to be treated, not the way you want to be treated, and understanding the different generational gaps that exist. I'm not going to communicate the same way with a new college grad that I am with somebody who's been in the business longer than I have, whether I'm their leader or not. And I think it's just, as a leader, you have an obligation to learn how to communicate in different ways with different people. And I think that we have to have a little bit more empathy, understanding the lived experiences of these early in career people that didn't have the same thing as me. And I'm like, I talk to my son now. I was like, ask for more things to do and do this and do that and do this. And he's like, Dad, I'm working hard. I'm getting recognized. Things are fine. Like, stop putting so much stress on me. And that's where, my job was built on stress. It's just like, Dad, it's not that way anymore. And I'm like, well, you don't understand. He's like, Dad, yes, I do. So it's just, I love having an early in career son who's helping me understand how he wants to be treated, because like without that, I'm like, shit, I have no idea how to communicate. But it's been great. I think things are great right now, but I do think, that it is important for us, as leaders to really understand how to communicate with different generational, gaps of people in their career.
So speaking of careers, how does young generation view career progression, which probably is different from how we viewed it?
Yeah. So when I was at Cisco, there was this sales executive who was at Cisco, founded or was the CEO of a social media company. This was probably 7 years ago. I mean, he came in and he did this presentation. He talked about how, everybody wants a promotion, and, I want to get promoted and I'm going to work hard. And he's like, you have to realize that the majority of these people grew up playing video games, whether they liked them or not. A good majority of them learned how to, work playing video games. And once they pass one level, they expect to go to that next level. And it's just like, tell me what I need to do. I'm going to go do it. And then I expect to get promoted. Well, historically, that's not how the business world worked. And so this guy says, I created 10 levels for every job level I had. So, when I was at Cisco, you started as a grade 4, and then you went to grade 6, and then you went to a grade 8. And he said there were 10 levels between grade 4 and grade 6. And they loved it. Because they set that expectation that it's not always just a checkbox, but it's just these different levels to reach that next level. And there's just that perception of how that transformed. And these were people that were working at his company, and it worked within his company. I'm not saying that that'll work everywhere, but I do think that there's an expectation of, I do my job, I get promoted. And that's when, I used to to joke with a couple of people who are like, I've got somebody on my team that doesn't want to get promoted. And I'm like, God, I would love to have some of those people that just want to come in and do their job because, as a manager, you can't always set an expectation that people are going to get promoted every 12, 18, 24 months at different levels, depending on how hard you work. When I was, you were stack ranked and the people at the top 5 got promoted. Now, I don't know that works anymore either, but trying to set those expectations and help early in career people understand how the promotion process, but providing that transparency, providing that visibility. They just want visibility. Like, what do I do next? I don't even know it. I was unbelievably fortunate to have a couple people that were leaders in my organization when I was at Cisco that pushed me into different areas, and they pushed me into these areas that I never would have gone to. And it's just, hey, I'm going to take a chance on that. I knew that I had too many parts or not enough parts, and I wanted to get out of IT or out of supply chain. And then in IT, I knew I didn't want to go in the infrastructure, so I went into procurement. And I'll tell you, when Alex Lopez first pinged me on our internal messaging, I saw her name came up and I knew exactly who she was. My first reaction was like, oh my God, procurement. I don't want to do that. I don't want to do, they buy pens, pencils, and toilet paper, and they make the process difficult for everybody. And that's when I realized, one, I wanted to work for her, and two, that transformation of procurement was really happening, and getting that credibility. I was like, I want to be a part of that. And I've loved it.
And I think you nailed it, why we stay in procurement and why, even after being in the function for so many years, we would like to continue to contribute it. At least you verbalize my commitment to the function, that I would like to change the perspective for as many people as possible. That procurement is not about buying pencils, toilet paper, and making the process difficult. So thank you. That was so passionate and phenomenal, and I love every moment of it. Zach, would you like to set us off?
No, absolutely, Ted. Thank you so much. I think we covered such a broad set of topics here. Like and we'd love to have you back to deep dive into some of these things. Make sure you're delivering, building that credibility. Make sure you're communicating all the time. We talked about hiring and training and making sure your people are developing the right skills. Talked about how technology won't replace relationships and the human factor. We've talked about the next generation and the need to operate at their levels. So yeah, thanks, Ted. It's been absolutely great having you. Thanks so much.
Yeah, it's been fun. I enjoyed the conversation. Thank you both. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. Best of luck with the golf season.
Thank you.